statute against it.
We now call this regular workshop meeting of Jacksonville City Council to order. City Council, we have a copy of the proposed agenda tonight, and we have an add-on that we'll tack at the end of that's number 11. This is dealing with the resolution proposing House Bill 765. This is a local government development regulations omnibus bill. So for that, I would entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move that the resolution opposing House Bill 333, number 8, also being moved for discussion in full after item number 11.
Second.
Also 539.
Might as well, since it's all legislative action.
Let's pull them all out. Let's pull all the cards out. Okay. All right. And that's your motion.
That's my motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second.
Oh, of course, somebody else already had it, sorry.
All right, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay. Next, we have the adoption of the minutes and consent items. The minutes are from the March 18th, 2025 regular meeting. Motion, please.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, so we're going to go ahead and go to number 8 here, and this is House Bill 333. I'd like to refresh my memory again, which one is which.
Mayor, House Bill 333 was introduced by Representative Phil Shepard to eliminate the ETJ for the city of Jacksonville and to allow that ETJ to be served by Onslow County. It's gone through a couple different committees so far. Mr. Shepard made the comment today that this was endorsed by the city and the county in the second session, and Representative Wyatt Gable seconded that he had spoken with us and that we were in support of this bill. I can tell you this bill has some companion bills throughout the state. There's a trend for the state legislature to reduce the ETJ governance across the state, but there are only a few bills that are specific to a municipality. The others are general, and you're going to see that on some of the other items, Mayor. This one's specifically City of Jacksonville by Jacksonville representatives.
Did I hear you right that he said that we had allowed for support of that?
That City of Jacksonville and Onslow County both support this bill. I have emailed Representative Shepard, I've emailed Representative Gable, I've emailed Senator Lazzara, and I've emailed at least 45 other House members, informing them of why we need the ETJ, the value of the ETJ, and why we do not support it. If council approves this tomorrow, every member of the North Carolina House of Representatives will receive this resolution if approved by council.
Also, I had a 30-minute telephone conversation with Representative Shepard, at which time I told him that I understood the situation that they had with the ETJ not having the ability to vote for things, but at the same time, the city of Jacksonville does have an obligation to protect our borders along with the spaces around the base, to protect that training mission. So that's why we are against the passage of this bill.
Mayor, the Metro Mayors have continued to track these bills for us and to continue to dialogue back and forth with us. For council and everybody else, we are on a meeting weekly with the Metro Mayors Association. Mr. Massey and I are typically on that every single week, and we dialogue with the other Metro Mayors groups, staff, and mayors about this type of legislation. And although I understand some of the challenges that people experience, I don't see that here in our community. I do know that we've had a couple people in the time that I've been here that have contacted me and or members of council talking about some of the challenges they have. But it turns out a lot of those people don't want any type of regulation that happens on their property. So to look at it versus the county having it versus the city having it, the county doesn't protect municipal boundaries, nor do they prioritize protecting the perimeter of our bases, and that would be Camp Lejeune and New River Air Station. So I think I strongly believe as being a military host city, that's our responsibility. So this bill specifically creates a challenge for staff that it reduces our ability to effectively partner with the United States Marine Corps in their mission and our mission.
The league opposes it also.
Yes, sir. And so the reason, Mayor, that we've brought this to council, we've changed our approach. We see that the state is being a little more aggressive in how they start considering these bills. We feel that if we present these items to council, it's very clear whether you want us to push that initiative, because this goes back to the council adopted initiatives that you've already approved. But if you oppose these specific bills, we're going to share that information with our legislators and allow them to use that in their discussions.
Now, I understand that a lot of this emanates from a desire to not have city doing inspections of these places that are just outside the city limits. Correct me if I'm wrong, but don't we in the county use the same North Carolina State Fire Code to do these inspections by?
Yes, sir. We still use the same building code and the same fire code. Just depending on when we adopt.
Is there an advantage?
Mayor, I believe that it comes down to individuals. I believe it comes down to if you want to work with the fire marshal or you want to work from someone with the county. That's what I've seen in my time here with the city is maybe the interpretation's a little different, and so you don't want that regulation through that interpretation. However, I do feel confident that we've worked through all of those issues that have been brought to my attention. So no matter how you look at the code, the fire code specifically, there aren't many gray areas in the fire code. So I do struggle with that interpretation or that challenge.
You're either in compliance or you're not. As plain as the nose on your face, the fire code is.
Most of the time, Mayor.
Well, it's not a whole lot of interpreting.
I believe our UDO and our zoning ordinance allow for more interpretation than what the fire code does in those instances.
I don't think it's so much the building codes and the fire codes. I think it's the UDO. I think that causes them the problem and the heartburn.
Josh, who is, for example, new construction in the ETJ? Who's doing the building inspection? The county or the city?
That's the city.
It has to be the city, since it's in the ETJ.
Since it's in the ETJ.
And not the county.
Yes, ma'am. We do all those. The only reason we wouldn't do it is if for some reason we couldn't accommodate and we needed a backup, but we're doing all those.
And if we needed a backup and the county did it, would they do it to their inspections or would they do it to ours?
Like the mayor said, it's the same standard,
Okay.
but they would do the inspection based on the fire code. And that's where Mr. Warden's talking about on the UDO. We would handle that. We wouldn't farm that out because that's a separate code than what the county would operate under. And so that's a city code where the fire code stays universal, just like the building code, Mr. Warden's saying.
And the problem is when you apply for a building permit in ETJ and there's extra landscaping required that the county doesn't require, there may be sidewalks that are required. The parking is different. People get upset.
There's an easy way to fix that. Don't buy land in that area.
Mayor, the comment that Representative Shepherd gave today, he only had one extra comment today.
Well, that's what it means.
His concern was that people in the ETJ do not have representation on city council. What we've shared back with members of the House is we have ETJ representation on our planning board. That's where we have representation because that's what the law required when we set that up, is that we would have an ETJ member serve on that board. So he's not wrong, but there's another layer there that there is representation for those individuals. So
Just not on the council.
it creates a challenge, just not on council.
And it's not just new development. There's people who live there that want to do something to their own home or their own property, and they're already there, so it's a little
Correct.
bit.
And they're not grandfathered in.
Those are the ones I have the most concern for, as far as, the presence of fairness being there. right on the corridors, the gateways into the city. It just makes sense that we exercise some control. And, with the base too, with, to protect the mission sort of thing, we don't want things springing up that would impact the base ability to do their required training, et cetera.
Historically, Mayor, the state has fluctuated on the limits of the ETJ, and across the country, historically, at one point, you had the ability to go 10 miles out from your borders. And so a lot of people would take their municipal boundaries and they would take a 10-mile radius and just circle all the way around. And that would be their sphere of influence, their control, whatever that would be. That's how they interpret it. Then there were cities and towns across the country that decided we would scale it back because we just couldn't handle going out that far. It took too much manpower, back to Mr. Bittner's comment. So people chose to enact a 5-mile, a 3-mile. The number that has come to the country as a standard goes to about a 1 mile. Some states still allow the 3 mile. Some regions allow a little larger because you have a lot of sprawl. But the challenge comes back to it's not control, it's being able to manage that. And we still want to get there in a reasonable amount of time, provide the input, and then process whatever their application may be. And that's our challenge. We've just got to stay ahead of it. We don't want to delay it. But some of those requirements, like Mr. Warden says, they're going to be more stringent.
Now, was this just a local bill?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Specifically.
But there's other local bills of similar.
There are 2 other that I'm aware of, Mayor.
Okay.
One for Durham, where this conversation started out.
And where's the other one?
I don't remember the third one, Dr. Washington, I apologize. But it was a smaller community, and my thought initially was it was outside of Charlotte, but now unfortunately, I've read too many bills.
That's what.
Yeah, I think I like your idea better.
Do it.
I like your suggestion.
Yeah.
What, just don't bill?
Yeah.
I think given the fact that there has been a statement saying that this is supported by the city when we're maybe concerned for the citizens who live there, understand the challenges, but are not in support of this bill. Opposing it puts it on record that that's not accurate and that we would rather, not proceed without a voice in the discussion at least.
We've made some individual exceptions to this as far as ETJ. We cut out a lot of it. I know we got exception letters from Randy Willis out there on Halltown Road. We took him out. There was no way in this world that was ever going to impact the city of Jacksonville, in my opinion, where he was at. And that's one of the reasons why that was moved out. I think Mr. Carr, did he submit a letter? Did he ever submit a letter?
I don't know if he submitted the final letter. I don't think we received one from Mr. Carr requesting to be removed from the ETJ, but I'm looking to Ryan to see if he'd received it. I don't recall.
Yeah, I know there was a letter sent. I think it was just wanting to be out of the ETJ so that he didn't have the fire inspection done by the city. But as far as an application, we never received an application. But our stance was also the last ETJ reduction we did. We took a full, every department was involved that needed to be involved with ETJ reduction, and we surgically removed all the areas that we felt that needed to come out, and we did that.
And we did it very proactively. Again, I know Mr. Humphrey out there in Pumpkin Center, we did a cutout for him. There was no way in this world the city would ever, and it was like a mile off the road, off of 17. So I know we've made individuals based on good common sense, cutting them out. But, there's some of them, though, that would impact future growth of the city, so.
Unless they want a voluntary annex, though, we don't have the involuntary power anymore, so they'll have to comply if they ever want to come in.
I wouldn't hold out hope for that for too long either, because I believe that'll probably be another hurdle to hop over at some point in time.
Looking at House Bill 539, where they want to take away the tax authority, property tax authority.
Well, that'd be okay, I guess, with us if they would give us a alternate.
A hold harmless
Yeah,
revenue stream.
yeah. Anyway.
Where does the county stand on this?
Well, I talked to the county manager today and said the same comment, and they have no change in their stance, that this is not something that they've pushed or supported. And so I don't think there's been any consistency in terms of that statement. There could be individuals in the community that do support it, and I believe there are. I believe Representative Shepherd comes from a good place, that he's listened to some people provide feedback, and he's encouraged by the concept. I struggle with it being a local bill instead of being something that's an initiative statewide that everyone would vote on based on that. Because when they hear that the city of Jacksonville and Onslow County both support it, I just believe that to not be true, and that's challenging to hear again today for the second committee hearing.
Next.
Ready for a motion?
Yeah.
Make a motion that we adopt the resolution.
Second.
Any further discussion on 333? All right. We have House Bill 539.
Mayor, House Bill 539 deals directly with the property reevaluation taxing local authority. So with the reval coming up for our community this year, next year, what this bill would say is that local governments must adopt the revenue neutral tax rate or a lower tax rate. So it would eliminate a council's ability locally to create a higher tax rate and therefore a different revenue stream to provide for local services.
So there's no room for adding a growth factor into it at all?
No, sir. Not the way that it's written now. And so for us, again, staff-wise, we look at this, Metro Mayor, same discussion, we look at it and say, eliminating that local authority creates a challenge that you don't see this across the country. Wherever your tax rate's at right now is pretty much where you would see it fluctuate over the next however many years until the legislation were changed again.
No, this wasn't a local bill. This is,
No, sir.
It's full.
If I read it right, it really restricts you only during the period of reval.
During reval.
The year after, if you wish to raise the taxes, you certainly can.
That's how I read it as well, yes, sir. So if you have a 4-year, 6-year, 8-year reval, we have a 4-year period of reevaluation. You could come the next year and change your tax rate after that.
The next 3 years after.
That's right. You could strategically carve out that new tax rate every year thereafter, and then when the reval comes, then you drop it to wherever it would go.
Slippery slope.
It is challenging. And Mayor, I'd say this on most of these bills that we're reviewing that have challenges. We saw this last year. We saw this year before. We see a lot of bills at the State House that are trying to restrict local authority from those municipalities and counties. That's what we've seen trend-wise. Last year, a lot of these died in committee. Some didn't make the vote on the floor. But it just seems risky when you see this number of bills coming in last minute. I mean, that's how we ended up with the restrictions that we had with our planning at the budget bill last year that was for Hurricane Helene relief. Attached onto the end, we had restrictions that caused a lot of people some challenges with planning and zoning.
You said the League of Municipalities has taken a position on this?
They have, and they have adamantly fought against this, and the Metro mayors as well. So we have both of those entities, Mr. Bittner, that have come out and said,
Okay.
we don't support it. What they've encouraged us to do is to find conversational points that we can have a mid-ground moving forward. The challenge is, this is a bad debate on price. This is going far left versus a far right, and then we're supposed to find that middle ground, but they're in session one vote, we lose the middle ground. So I'm not sure of the strategy right now. I just know that I don't feel as confident about the lobbying efforts to fight these issues when they're staying year over year. I feel like
There's nobody lobbying for this. This is just being generated out of the House. But, I mean,
it appears that way in discussions, Mayor.
It's actually a Senate bill. This is House bill.
Yeah, this is House as well. But there are forces on both sides, on the House and the Senate, that have come up with some of the concepts. And so hopefully, as always, they work together to figure out what the most effective and efficient bills are that are going to be passed. Hopefully.
Okay.
Shoot, this went down.
let's do a motion on that.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? If you're not all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, I'm going to make that add on 9B so we can get all these at one time. This is House Bill 765, which is the local government development regulation omnibus bill.
Mayor, and I apologize, this is an add-on and you didn't get to see it beforehand. This is one of the latest added bills that came out of the North Carolina House. What 765 does, you'll see in the resolution, it reduces our ability for multiple planning, zoning, and development regulations. But what it also does is it restricts even greater some of the responsibilities of the council, the authority of the council. One of the statements that's been included inside of the draft language for this bill is that a local government authority member, a council member who has a predetermined vote on an item has to abstain from voting. So if you come in to a council meeting like today and you said, hey, I think I'm against HB 765, if you told someone that, then theoretically you can't vote. You got to say, I already made up my mind before I got here. This is the only place where you can have a decision like that. It does create some challenges for local authority. I understand some of the concept of where the intent comes from, but reducing our ability to regulate cities and towns differently than other cities and towns seems to be extremely aggressive, and it takes away any of that character that I think is important for over 550 municipalities in the state of North Carolina.
Do we have opposition being advocated for this?
We do, yes, sir. This is something I talked to Senator Lazar about when Mr. Jackson and I went to his chamber lunch, and he mentioned this one specifically to us because he said there's some legislation in the works that is basically all-encompassing, reducing local authority for planning, zoning, and subdivision regulations. So pay attention to this one because this is what the trend looks like. And so Ryan sent this out to us and the team, and we started reviewing it to look at some of those individual items. You can see the list. We've included 8 items here, but you'll see those are some of the highlights. I think this bill in itself is 90 pages, 220. Anyway, it's one of the more wordy documents, whereas the HB 333 was a third of a page. This one is very lengthy with a lot of layers to it.
Isn't this the one also that allows residential inside of commercial zoning without any kind of, like just, oh, well, I want to build housing, so I'm gonna.
It does have the aspect, and it also has the accessory dwelling unit tied into it, but there are population restrictions in this bill as well. So there's a differentiation between populations of 125 and greater versus below that threshold. So there's multiple layers to drill down on, but it does allow for different residential options inside of a commercial district that previously would not have allowed for that restriction. It basically says, the comment that was in the first House committee that I listened to said, local governments, basically back to Dillon's rule, should only have the authority expressly given to them by the state and nothing more stringent. That was the comment made from one of the representatives. But again, I believe that goes back to the character of a community and what the elected body chooses to say is important in our community. And we've had that discussion over the last 2 years. What do we want to see on our corridors and our neighborhoods? this bill as it's written and been drafted restricts those local options.
And if, go ahead. And if number 8 is saying that we as a governing body, if we have our minds predetermined, we recuse ourselves, so that's really pretty much saying that anything that has to do with a subdivision of a land being proposed, it's going to be a quasi-judicial matter. And, you know, you have to swear to tell the truth, well, not necessarily tell the truth, but basically to admit that you haven't done any proprieties on the side. And if you have, and if you don't recuse yourself, then the city could possibly be looking at a lawsuit.
I believe so, Dr. Ray. I think what it says in some of the intent in the discussions, I go back to what I heard in committee, it's the intent is then there's an action for your action.
There's a
consequence. I mean, not even a consequence, but there is an equal and opposite reaction if you take a vote and then someone says, you walked in the door and you said to Ms. Edwards, hey, you know, I'm struggling with this and I don't think I can vote for it, before you got into the actual meeting. Now, I'm digging down deep into what I heard, but I think that interpretation where they were asking for clarification, a lot of that's technical in terms of how would it happen.
It's undefined. It's an undefined term, it's a new term, and it almost comes down to mind reading, because if you've got documents and files and you have access to those and you need to prepare ahead of the meeting, reading them ahead of time and understanding, perhaps having a position
before you get
is not a bad thing because you're prepared and you've done your homework. So now you can be penalized for doing your homework if it gets to the.
I do see it that way.
I don't understand number 8 down here, because the way this reads to me is we're knocked out of the loop. It's a staff decision.
And that's another aspect specifically to 8, where interestingly enough, it takes it away from the council and puts it into a staff interpretation, which again, seemingly goes against the concept of what we're trying to achieve on interpretation.
So on number 8, if I may, basically there's some, unlike the city council, right now subdivisions are administrative approval. There are still some cities and towns that it is up to the boards and commissions and councils to make a decision. This proposal would put it at a staff level, which means they're not even going to allow the city council to make a decision on a subdivision. They're going to put it in the staff's hands. And to go back to the other component, is it says that it's going to bar the members of local governing boards from even having a discussion on an item if you have a preconceived notion going into it. So you can't even discuss it, yet alone recuse yourself. You can't even talk about it.
And I find that challenging for an elected member of the governing body to not have some kind of concept, because you need to have the information. You have to get it. Another aspect that we see in this, Mayor, refers back to the shot clock and some things. You know, last year and the year before, the shot clock was a big issue. What they're saying there on that policy is the amount of time that the city staff has an item before they get it back to the developer, the engineer, the architect. So you see some of those reference points back into this language. Good thing for us, which it's not as big of a problem for us, is because we track this through our e-plan system, and so we can show you at any point how long staff has had it, which divisions had it, and then when we've sent it back, and we use that as a plus when we're talking to developers. Part of the discussion here goes back to they feel like we're dragging our feet across the state, which there are municipalities that don't have as good of a turnaround time, and so it's A, we need it back faster, B, we need you to say what we're doing is right. I think that's the challenge, Mayor.
Yeah, I could understand that if on things that are judiciary in nature.
This is not just directed at municipalities, it's directed at counties also.
This is both.
You know, as far as discussing, you know, our discussions about it.
I think that's a big challenge, Mayor. I don't know how that part of it works. I haven't had as much heartburn over the shot clock discussion over the past few years as other municipalities. The league has fought it, the metro mayors have fought it, but I feel like the system we have in place is pretty effective in that we're getting things back. We're just not always responding with the answer that someone wants to have, but we're still getting it back in a reasonable amount of time. So those aspects, if we were going back to try and find a medium, I'd go back to those areas and say, here you go. But as written, there's just so many challenges and so many layers for us.
Mr. King, can you provide a little bit more explanation for number 2? Because it's comparing a zoning of being more, that is prohibited if it's more restrictive than state law.
So remember, North Carolina, we're a bill and rule state, so that means that we can only do the things that the state allows us to do. So we've got our planning and zoning legislation, which is in 160D, that's where all the planning development regulations are. And this is just another opportunity for the state to say, well, we can't do certain things. So like one of the bills that we've talked about is that we wouldn't be able to require that Walmart have one space for every 300 square feet of square footage. They only want to provide 50 spaces for a 200,000 square foot Walmart. They'd have the ability to do that. Right now, we're allowed to have those development regulations.
Yeah, and Mr. Warden mentioned parking earlier, and that you hear the same thing that Ryan's mentioning. That's a great discussion, parking. But imagine, now it's one thing for us to say that a downtown district, which the city council has decided you don't have to have the required parking there, but if you have that all over the city, then where does everybody park? So, we talk about this in residential development. You can only have so many vehicles there if you don't have on-street parking. A lot of areas that we have issues if you don't have a street that's wide enough, we've talked about before, then you're creating access issues. So if people are doing commercial development, they don't have any parking regulation, then where are people going to park? I see that as a bad business plan. But for some of these discussions, it comes out as, well, it's my business, so if I'm not worried about people parking to get here, why are you worried about it? And that's some of the discussion you hear right now at the state level. Why do cities know better about how I'm going to run my business than I know? And we, as I've said many times, Mayor, we don't know that. We just know congestion, traffic patterns, emergency response, how we deliver services. That's what we do know. And anything that creates a restraint, someone asked us today, how are we connecting people to places if we don't want them driving cars all the way? Well, we're working on trails, rails to trails, bike paths, blueways. We're doing alternative methods. We have public transportation because we're trying to cut down on congestion for the 90,000 to 100 people that come in and out of the city every day. And you see the same in Charlotte, you see the same in Raleigh, you see it in Nashville. I mean, everybody in this top 15 to 20 communities have the same type of issues. So we're almost to a point where if the local doesn't want the cities to handle it, what makes the state better at handling that? Ryan and I, it's a fun conversation. We were talking yesterday. That means that state staff is going to come down and they're going to handle these quasi-judicial hearings. They're going to enforce sign regulations. They're going to track down loose dogs. It seems extreme, but the way that our legislative body's doing right now at the state level, it feels like that's where it's going. Of, you want Dillon's rule, we'll take out a lot of local authority.
Okay, so I guess we need a motion for this one.
You might, I was going to wonder, is everyone familiar with Dillon's rule?
I mean, we are creatures of the state.
That's important to this discussion.
It's critical for all the discussions when you hear that. And then, the counties are legislative bodies. They actually have more authority in terms of the way that North Carolina lays out. But we get those rights and responsibilities that the state doesn't want to handle on a local level. So it is the foundation, I believe, of most of these discussions at the House for the last few years.
All right. Shall we send this one?
I'll make
I'll move it.
second.
Discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay.
Mayor, excuse me.
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to verify that on House Bill 333, it was a unanimous vote. Is that correct? I didn't hear that. I apologize. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Let me suggest about these resolutions is that they're, in terms of direction, they seem to be generic. I would suggest that these resolutions carry the authorization for the mayor to direct these resolutions to the attention of each member of the General Assembly for Onslow County. So it puts a little people behind it rather than just words.
Okay. And Mayor, back to that point, tomorrow, as I said, if you sign these tonight and we get the hard copy, then I plan to send those individually to every member tomorrow. And that just draws the attention.
Make sure you send one to our senator, too.
I'm going to send it all to our senator. Mayor, I believe that our best avenue to protect local authority and our rights is Senator Lazzara, and I believe that Senator Lee is another person that can provide some assistance in these discussions. So I think that's where we're going to get some type of support, but I've only named 2 members, and I can't give you a long list of people that I expect will do that. But we have contacted a number of people that have been supporters in the House of local options. And like I said, that's the 42, 43 members that I've already communicated with. Those individuals have spoken up and said, we support local authority.
Good.
I don't think that number is great enough, so we got to find some friends on the other side.
Mr. Ray, I don't know, is there any possible way on another matter that we can research, or if you and your staff can research House Bill 1071 as it relates to legislative being introduced to change the election for the Jacksonville municipal elections?
Oh, that's already been changed, already been done, finished out.
Yeah, I haven't seen it again this year,
So
but I will check to make sure that nothing's lingering, but
we killed it? Okay.
Pretty much.
Okay.
yes, ma'am, but I'll verify and I'll send out a follow-up tomorrow.
That was the, I think Representative Cleveland had introduced that in the last session.
With the support of
It was stopped.
Representative Shepherd. Ready for the next one?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. I do appreciate those discussions. It's great for us to get extra support in terms of the direction for staff to dialogue back. Obviously, at staff level, we provide direction to our lobbyists at the state. We provide expert opinions for multiple items. But when it comes down to the direction of council, really what we had was our council initiatives that we've been using, and now we'll use these as firepower to send back as a very clear message to our legislators. Mayor, this item here on the agenda is the FY26 budget. In front of you, you have 2 books. One is the proposed FY26 budget that has the honeycomb front, and the other is the FY26 draft capital improvement plan that has New Bridge Street on the front. What I wanted to do is, we've used the same format the last couple of years, walk you through what's inside of the budget document tonight. If you have any questions on the format or the things that are here, or just general questions, we'll answer that. And then when we come back to our next meeting in 2 weeks, then what we would like to do is we handle the main part of the meeting in chambers. Then we bring a workshop into here so council can ask the additional questions into this document here. What we have in the budget book is, you'll start out on page 3, you have a brief message about this budget where we talk about the items that council has given us in terms of direction, things we need to do. Then we go over into, on page 7, we're showing you the 5-year fund balance comparison for the general fund. What we're doing is we're looking fund to fund, and so we're highlighting those numbers. What you'll do is you're able to track how our expenditures have fluctuated over the past and what that means for our closing balance and then the unassigned fund balance. Remember, the closing balance is going to give you the total amount of reserves in that fund, and then the unassigned is going to be those funds that have not been earmarked by council, by the state, or by some other entity that we have to spend in the future. When you go into page 8 and to page 9, you're going to see fund summaries. And on these items, you're going to see 2-year comparisons. So you're going to see on the left-hand side on page 8 and on page 9, that's the current budget, the FY25 amended. That includes the approved budget by council and then every item that you've amended the budget during the year. And then the right-hand column will give you what we're proposing for FY26. So on page 8, what you'll see is The FY25 amended at the very bottom shows $80.728 million on the general fund. What we're proposing on the FY26 general fund is $64.965 million on that. So we're showing you those comparisons so you see the immediate. What you're seeing here is transfers in on the FY25. That's why you see such a difference of plus or minus 16 million. It's not, we've not made those cuts, but these are external funds coming into that fund. And then on page 9, you're going to see the same for the water and sewer fund. You'll see a comparison for FY25 of $54.1 million, and then FY26 you're going to see $32.3 million that comes into here. The basis for all these budgets, Mayor, is the first thing we did. We included that 5% increase on the total salary and benefits line for the budget for employees. And we're breaking that down into the same standard of a market increase that'll happen in July, and then a merit increase that'll happen in January. Same plan we've had for the last 3 years. Market increase will happen. That's based on our defined market, the CPI, and where we're at right now with our goal of trying to move our people throughout the pay plan. And then the merit increase are based off of your employee evaluations that occur. Those will all be wrapped up by December, so we implement those in January to get that for the second January payroll or the first in February. So you have two different potential pay adjustments for all staff that have been here for 6 months, basically.
Mr. Ray, a question with everything's, not everything, but with some of the changes that's going on in Washington, D.C., do you foresee government funding being restrictive that can potentially impact our ability to adopt and approve a budget by our June 30th date? And if it did, and we still adopted our budget, do we have the flexibility of going back after that June 30th to amend our budget if need be, based on government restriction of funding?
Yes, ma'am. We've been monitoring that. If you recall, we sent out the list of federally funded grants that could be impacted, and we had over $60 million, and I think that's why it's just $60 million that two people effectively manage. That's why it's a real issue, because that covers, effectively, that's the whole general fund. Obviously, it's split up into multiple pots. But when we look back at the council initiatives, one of your comments before was the federal government's looking at the words that we use in some of our operations. So we look back at our council initiatives, and we're talking about cultural engagement. We're talking about citizen awareness and inclusive programs that make sure that everybody at this table has an opportunity to participate in programs. I think you see some concerns at the federal level that would create challenges. For us, I don't think that those word choices are going to impact our funding ability. The second layer of your question, though, do we think that we're going to be impacted negatively by a reduction in some of those projects? What we've seen on some white papers at the state and at the federal level are, for example, our HUD funds, those that are already earmarked. We feel confident that we have those. We put those into action with our 5-year action plan. And so we feel confident that we're able to move forward with those funds based on they're not rulings that have come down necessarily, but based on opinions from individual departments. With that being said, we still have to be mindful that if we've allocated $500,000 for a project and all of a sudden that funding's pulled, if we want to keep that project going or that program, we've got to backfill it with a budget amendment that says that's going to come from a fund balance from somewhere. So I answer that third part of the question, Dr. Washington. Yes, at any point that we have an analysis that says there's a challenge with the funding coming down from the federal or state level, we'll bring that back to council immediately so that council makes that decision based on new information that's made aware to us. At this point, I feel confident with the structure that we have. And I also know those $60 million in grants, they don't just magically disappear. Some of those are going to fall off, but our people are constantly applying for new funds. So we're going to have other things that are coming out. Unfortunately, I do believe that the federal government is slightly in a flux right now, so I can't confidently say one way or the other. I just know that should we need to pivot, that's coming back to this board.
I got a different word than flux, but that's all
It's the
right.
best thing I could come up with, Mr. Bender.
Any tea leaves with the county and how they're going to go?
They're doing the same thing. So they did, when we pulled our numbers on our grants, they pulled their numbers as well. They presented that back to the commission. They took the same approach. We don't feel like we have the volatile funds, for the best way I can say it, that haven't been earmarked. So our programs and our funds are earmarked for specific projects. We don't feel those are at risk. The county's taking a similar stance in how they're going to handle their federal grants for this year. FY27, all bets are off the table, but for FY26, I believe the way we've allocated funds is conservative to the projects that have been funded with a specific intent. And that's why one of our pushes is always get a project started, do it the right way, and close the project. Because the more times you have a project that hasn't started, that's when we think you're going to see a clawback. You know, that was one of the things that we saw with ARPA funds, then with ARP funds. If you're not engaging in projects in a timely manner, they may be pulled out. We saw that with Maysville for one of their projects this past year. They didn't start the project, and so they were pulling the funds back out. So we know it's an opportunity, both state and federal. So we have to get our projects underway. I think that's an excellent point, Dr. Washington. And we'll continue to monitor it and then send the comments back to council. So that foundation, item number 1, pay plan. We listen, we put the numbers in, we're moving things through the process. The second part of that is the CIP. That's why we've gone over that plan with you, and the draft is right in line with what Wally presented before. So those items are into the budget, and then you'll see the individual funds. They're right in line with previous years on the actual expenses. You know, one of the things that we see year to year is we may budget $64 million in general fund for expenses, but if you look back at last year's audit, we spent $50 million. We've not had $14 million in overall change in how we do business, but we did have some staffing vacancies last year. We didn't have $14 million worth of staffing vacancies, but we had vacancies. So with the vacancy also comes the benefits, some of the programs, some of the projects, some fuel costs, other items. So if you track what we've spent year over year, let's say we're tracking at 55, 56 million. Well, we're budgeted for 64 million on the general fund side. There's a little bit of a hole. We could spend all those funds, but we'll only know by the time we get to that audit. So I put that out there to council is we use last year's audit to give us the parameter, but it's really just a place where we restart the year so we can plan for the following year. So that's the baseline principles that we have so far included in this budget. Then we do have 5 new positions that we've proposed to council through our review process. You're going to see those on page 27 and 28, Mayor. 27 is going to be the first of the white papers, which I was going to go through and just walk you through those items. But we have those items where we've included those positions. Public Services is looking to add 2 positions to the street division so that we can bring utility cut repairs in-house. We feel that that's a net sum zero game there, if not more efficiency, but it may reduce the expenses we have. We're definitely looking forward to being able to handle this in-house and be a lot more effective on street cuts and those repairs. We see that adding a apprentice program for building inspectors. We noticed this past year in the region, there was a shortage of building inspectors. So our goal is to develop those inspectors with an apprentice program internally so that we can grow inspectors. And if those individuals either stay with us, great, or if they go off to other communities, we see that as a value. What we learned last year, one individual was no longer available to do inspections for multiple communities, and that put them all in a bind, and we can only help so much. And so for us, we want to be able to build that program, and we think that's our responsibility to have a feeder program for our building inspectors. We've also included a utilities tech for public services and an additional planner for the planning and inspections department to focus on specific needs, whether that's specifically focused on long-range planning or in a redevelopment zone, maybe that's a downtown type of planning. That's all included within this budget. So 5 positions full-time. So we would go from 626 full-time positions to 631 FTEs for the year. If you cross over to page 29, then for the first time, we've added the organizational chart for the city into the document. This is something we would like to have every year into the council to consider with your annual budget resolution. What that shows you now is, and this is some of the questions that we've had recently, it shows you how our plan works between the citizens, the mayor, the manager, deputy manager, our assistant managers, and the departments. So one of the questions may be, what is this person's responsibility? What you see here is a breakdown of those departments and who they'll report to and who their support is from the city manager's office. In our discussions with both Mr. Blackman and Mr. Prinz, we had this discussion. We talked about strengths, weaknesses, and experiences, and we've tried to put together a system that creates the support that our directors need. So we've added this in to the document so that everybody knows with the approval of the budget, this is what you have on an org chart. When we approve through the budget, we'll add this, we'll update online as well, Mayor. But this is the operations as of today for how we're operating. If you go over to page 30, we've included a different page this year. This is a health insurance update. Every year, you're going to hear your counterparts talk about rising healthcare costs. What we've done is we've given you basically the CPI for healthcare costs. You see medical at about 7.5%. What we included on this page, and it's a very simple breakdown, we showed you the FY24 actual plan expenses, the FY25, and what's budgeted for FY26, and we included below that the fund balance. So we have to keep a healthy fund balance inside of the self-insured fund to make sure we can cover all of our expenses. But we do that based on the city's contribution and the employee's contribution. The biggest part on this item is to say we're not proposing any increase in employee charges or allocation this year. So we're keeping it, employee contributions staying the same as previous 2 years. Any increases will be handled within the fund for this year. Mind you, come next year, we may have to come back with a different presentation to council to say we might need to change that, but we would want you to consider that with everything else that we would consider in terms of benefits. Because I think that's a huge benefits package that we give to our employees, and I think that has to be tied into it. So we've added this page this year because I know that people are going to ask you questions in other communities that you dialogue with. What are you guys seeing for health insurance? We're seeing 7.5%. We've included 7% in our projections based on previous history, and no increase to employee contribution this year.
I see we're bidding out for dental insurance. Are we bidding out for health insurance as well?
No, the health insurance is we already did that with Cigna, and so we're now in year 2 with Cigna. Mm-hmm. That sound right? And I think that's
a 3-year contract.
Thank you. That's a 3-year contract. The dental was outside, and so that comes up we had a 2-year plan with Delta. No, not Delta.
It is also under Cigna, but it was a significant increase, so we're going out.
So that in itself is going out for bid now. So we have those proposals. Page 31, the fee schedule. We've talked about the fee schedule. There's some things that we wanted to include here so that you know what's been included. The water and wastewater rate increases of 2.25 based on previous discussion and direction from council. The residential and commercial and small business sanitation rate increases, those have been included at these levels inside. You'll have on the back of your book, if you flip to the back, you do have your fee schedule. So those changes that are proposed are highlighted in red. So when you have that opportunity, look at that. You'll see some planning and inspection fee changes. And then the last bullet point states that non-utility credit card processing fees will be the responsibility of the payer once the ERP implementation is complete. So what we're saying is, based on direction that council gave us at the last workshop, that's what will appear in this budget. You're not seeing a change in revenues that we'll have on our side. What you're actually seeing is those fees will be absorbed by the payer. So just want to clarify how that'll show up. It won't be a fee we're paying anymore. It'll be something that the payer will actually see on their bill separately. Yes, ma'am, a pass-through. So there are other items on the fee schedule. I just encourage you to look at that so that the next meeting we can ask those specifically. Page 32, Jacksonville Onslow Economic Development, AKA JOED. What we've put in here is this year we're expecting a change in how we do business with JOED based on the strategic plan. So right now for FY25, we have a $30,000 city commitment. Basically that goes to general operations. We have our final capital campaign commitment of $30,000. And then we put $30,000 into the strategic plan so that JOED could go through this process. And then council just authorized $50,000 into the small business revolving loan program. What we've included in the FY26 budget at this time is $40,000 for the general commitment and then a second appropriation of $50,000 for the small business loan program, as we talked about before. So we'll have the 50. If they spend it all by the time we get to FY26, great. If they don't spend it, we're still want to put 50,000 back in, and so we've allocated that here. What we believe, Mayor, is this is an item that as soon as the strategic plan is completed, which could happen in June, before the fiscal year starts, we're going to want to bring that back to council to look at what the needs of JOED are for next year and the next 3 years, because that, per our previous discussion, that may be an area where the council says we need to allocate additional funds for JOED moving forward. And so right now that number's 40. When I put in here, that's an increase over the 30,000, but it's actually a decrease because we're on that capital campaign, and so the 30 and 30 is 60, but we're not starting a new capital drive for JOED. So even though it's an increase on the one, effectively it's a decrease in that total amount. One of the things that we pushed other municipalities for this year is to have 100% participation from all the municipalities in the county, including Onwassa and the county. And hopefully we're going to make some headway in that discussion. We'll also have an agreement with JOED, a funding agreement that goes into place based on the consultant's recommendation to us. That was Ted Abernathy. Based on that recommendation, we'll present back to council what that funding agreement looks like. Basically, it gives us and JOED the metrics for how we will measure success, what JOED needs from us, what we need from JOED to be successful at the end of the year. But I bring this one up, Mayor, because you just have to know, even though we allocate this, back to Dr. Washington's point earlier, if council chooses to allocate additional funds for JOED, then we'll need to bring that back as a special discussion and then a budget amendment for FY26. Page 33, again, this is just bringing something to your attention. We have opioid funding. We've had multiple discussions on how we use opioid funding. For this year, we use that funding to support different activities through Onslow Community Outreach and through United Way of Onslow County. Those are two of our, I would say, two of our top partners in delivering services in the community. So we've used those funds there. What we're asking from council is for us to be able to use the opioid funds within our police and fire operations to supplement their overall funding. If you remember, opioid funds basically are set up for 10 years. So some of those funds we received in year 1, so they'll have 8 years left, 9 years left. Some we received in year 2, so they'll have 9 years. Some have just now come in, so they'll have 10 years out. But what we want to do is we want to allocate these funds and use those dollars towards combating the impact that opioids are having in our community. We haven't done that currently, Mayor. So if we had an allocation of $160,000 for the year, we allocated $60,000. We were leaving $100,000 still in that fund balance. We want to move that in to support those outreach efforts. Last year, we put maybe $15,974 into Narcan. Remember, we had that discussion that Mike gave us. We may have that again next year. We may decide we need to refill again. If that requires a budget amendment, we'd like to use that from the opioid funds. But at this time, we're not allocating those funds until we have that direction from council and until we have that defined plan. So right now, we're looking at continuing the partnership with Onslow Community Outreach and United Way, and then figuring out how we're going to use those funds moving forward. Any questions on that one? This goes back to that point earlier, again, to Dr. Washington's comment. We don't think that the best use of funds are to leave them sitting there waiting for some bigger plan. If you recall, the opioid funds, the majority of those funds went to the counties, and then the municipalities have smaller allocations. But for us, $160,000 a year, that's an allocation worth something, and we can maximize utility of those funds by being able to use those internally. So same kind of concept. The funds that are allocated now are in the budget. The other items we will bring back, and we would say, proposed funding, opioid funds, here's a balance, here's how we would like to allocate it, and this is the authority for us to use it for these outreach efforts.
Makes a lot of sense.
Quick, brings up the big center, crisis center. What's happening there? We haven't heard anything in a while.
Well, if you don't mind, Mike can give us an update.
Yeah, so the center, RI, who operated the center before, they let their contract or their license expire. Once they let their license expire, we had to go back, or they got a new contractor, Easter Seals. Easter Seals had to go back through the licensing process. So we're hopeful that within the next month or two that they'll finish that licensing process. But that takes about 6 to 8 months to complete. In fact, they had to do some renovations to the building in order to meet the newer standards for the Dix Crisis Center. So Trillium has a contract with Easter Seals to provide services. The challenge is getting the building upfitted and getting it ready for a new license.
So what about the funding for the gaps that was created by the Craven and Carteret?
So Senator Lazara provided some of that in the gap funding. And so that funding is being provided by the county, and it's also being provided by the state for at least the next, I think the next year.
So right now, they're not open.
They are not open.
So-
They can't be open until,
So Onslow Memorial, the ER department's got the burden, as well as the city police and the sheriff.
And the jail.
And the jail, right.
And our folks are going back down to Wilmington now.
Yeah, we can take them there.
hopefully that will be done. The contract's been signed, so we're just hoping that.
How many contributors are there now as far as financing that?
The only contributor right now is the county.
And Mayor, for FY, you'll see on this next on page 35, you'll see that we had $100,000 again in for FY 25, the current year. We didn't allocate those funds based on their inability to give us an agreement for how we were going to execute a funding agreement. Like we're talking about with all of our other partners, Mike was pushing this concept, hey, we're only asking for these parameters. He spent the time and effort trying to make that happen, and they couldn't make it happen. So for that $100,000, they needed to get us a 3-page agreement. They chose no. $100,000 didn't get allocated. So, and now this is the place that they're in. And as Mr. Jackson said, you've got a couple partners that have bailed. And so now, if we take anybody, we're taking them to Pender County, we're taking them somewhere else, or they're at the hospital, they're at the jail. It definitely creates a challenge.
That's what they do to us, right?
It is the challenge that we have now. So, and there's only so much that Senator Lazara and the state can do. I mean, at some point, we have to have a system that starts to work, and we're going to have to figure it out based on these partnerships. So it's a good lead in to 34 and 35. We wanted to show, last year we talked about the annual action plan and community outreach and how we changed that format. We're trying to bring everybody through the front door and the same door. So anybody that's asking for funds from the city, come through the same door. And then we have these requests that come in. So we've listed a couple items here. At the top of that page, you're going to see FY support that's been included for FY26. That's a little over $1 million. That's on page 34, and it's going to say, it starts out with the community development block grant of $437,000, and then it goes down through, those last two are the lease agreements that we have with the YMCA and with JOED. And so that number, $1 million. If someone asks you that question, that's what we're allocated for FY25 for community support funds, as we would call them. Down below, we're showing you the number for FY25. You see on page 35, that number is $2.696 million. That includes the 1.5 for the Aquatic Center from the YMCA, $333,000 for one place, and the other capital contributions for JOED and for the items inside of our annual plan. So we show you that so we can start to capture those dollars that we're putting back into the community. So when someone asks you, well, how are you utilizing your council initiatives? This is how you're using it. And we're just touching the surface on how we're impacting those groups, but this is a breakdown to give you a ballpark of where we're at and how we're spending those funds currently.
Mr. Ray, please forgive me if you've already mentioned this. Under the general fund, what is the pretrial resource center for $9 grand?
On the expenses, so that comes through our action plan, and so that's a nonprofit facility that we provide the $9,000 for.
And what is your mission again? I'm sorry.
I don't know specifically what their mission is. Tracy may be able to tell you directly.
All right. Go ahead.
So the pre-trial organization, what they do is they help citizens who are first offenders that may need some kind of counseling or whatever resources they need to keep them out of the system. But they are allocated just for city residents only.
It works as a diversion program, but the whole point is to not clog up the system.
And get a record.
Is this the final disbursement for the Aquatic Center?
That would be it. They have the funds from us, so we should be breaking ground on that, I believe.
Thursday.
You're right. That's Thursday. Don't forget, that's Thursday. I was thinking it was next week. Yeah, I did, totally. It's Tuesday, Dr. Washington. That's all I got right now.
No, I was on your side.
Somebody will get me there. But the point here is we want to track these numbers every year. We've asked police and fire, streets department, parks department to capture the overtime hours or the hours they spend on public functions that we're doing as in kind. These are things that we want to show public support, just like a parade where we're going to be out there managing. That's a smaller number, but when you look at their budgets, it makes a difference. It's public support for the things that we're here to do, and that's provide activities for our citizens. If you flip over to 36, Mayor, that's where you're going to see the capital improvement plan. As I said, you've got a separate book that lists out the draft CIP for the year. What we have allocated for FY26, there's about $28 million in CIP projects that are going. Those range from water and sewer projects to upgrading parks spaces. So these are the things that we have. At the top part in the introduction, we drew attention to the council initiatives. You have that 4 cents that you use out of the tax rate, plus or minus, that'll generate about 1.8 million. But you see that we use those funds for those council initiatives every year. And so it's important for us to recapture it here, so when people talk to you about either the tax rate or those projects, this is partial funding for that.
I know this is a roll-up here, but how much is in that? How much is, I guess, unassigned at this point? Do you?
I do know there's a number somewhere that tells that. I would defer over to the finance director if she could give you a ballpark.
Let him know that, and adding to him, I'd like to know what's coming off as far as, dates and stuff.
And we have that as well, Mayor.
Don't need them right now, just nice to have just a couple paragraphs explaining what it is.
On page 23, it has the beginning balance and the projected ending balance of the project that are part of the capital reserve, as well as it does have the payments committed. I can get back to you with exactly what's coming off, but I know one of the payments of $400,000 for the I think the 400 acres comes off for FY26, but I'll check on the remaining 2 payments.
So Mayor, when you look at page 23 and page 22, those 2 pages show capital reserve. And back to Mr. Warden's question, you'll see the bold at the bottom of both corners shows roughly $18.9 million sitting there in that reserve. And you'll recall we did move $10 million last year allocated for the 400-acre project into here to earmark those funds so that we have that foundation for the project.
So they're untouchable, correct?
Untouchable until you move it, Mayor. But from your last vote by the council, you said move it there, and that's where it's parked at now. So you'll see that equal and opposite reaction on the general fund side versus the capital reserve. Sorry, Mayor.
I'd also like to know, though, what's coming off when, if you give me it.
We'll get you that list. We have that. Sabrina sent me that list. I have that whole list. I just did not include it here. Maybe we'll send it out by email. And so for the CIP, since that's that second fundamental piece that the council puts on the initiatives, we want to put that in. If you go to page 37, this is just a generalized concept as well. If you recall last year, we talked about the equipment replacement plan. We're drawing attention to that because year over year, we want you to be aware of the equipment that's being replaced within that overall budget. So when you look at the general fund side, it's a lower year on equipment, so that's $1.2 million. If you look at water and sewer, $1.4 million, and then sanitation, a standard amount of $1.5. So you see those numbers year over year. Not a lot of fluctuation on equipment replacement because we try to keep those with the equipment replacement plan of how we're moving those strategically. And that's where we're at. You'll recall where Chief Tallman gave us the last update on the fire department equipment replacement schedule. That's a totally different schedule here just because of the size of that, but it's very similar to what Wally has shown us on the sanitation replacements. So those are high volume, high use pieces of equipment, and with that comes a high dollar. So when we make that final decision on when we're going to purchase the next apparatus for fire, then we have to decide, do we prepay like we did for the last one and go ahead and make that happen, or do we take another option? So we do page 37 for the equipment replacement plan, once again, just to capture that for you so you see it. Page 38, we only have 2 more items here. Page 38 is the Economic Impact Fund. That's the newly created fund by the council that focuses on housing and economic development. The reason we brought this to your attention is when you created this fund, you put $1 million on housing, you put $1 million on economic impact, or on economic development. The economic development gained funds through the sale of property to Amazon, so it has, and then it spent funds through purchase of additional land. It has $1.7 million on that side of the house. The housing side, we use funds from the housing side, and so we're below $1 million. What we're asking and what we've included in the budget is an allocation of $34,765 to bring that housing back to $1 million. What we want is, we want those funds available, so when we have the plan that comes up based on the DFI findings and what we're trying to do in housing development, we have those funds allocated so we can go ahead and move that and bring it to you without another budget amendment. If we spend those funds this year, next year you'll be faced with the same decision. What do we do to try and bring those numbers back into balance? Do we try and grow that? Are we selling land? Anything we sell, we want to move back into this fund. Back to your point, Mayor, is to keep those earmarked for those expenses so that when we give you a decision on purchasing land, you have it allocated to do it. You can obviously pull these funds to use for something else, but we would prefer to leave it here. So the only change for that fund for this year is upping the housing side back to make it whole for $34,765. So that would effectively give us $2.7 million in that side. And then on page 39, Mayor, the resiliency of government, I want to point out to council that we do not have resiliency funds necessarily built in for a catastrophic event. What we have built in is this is where we would use fund balance. From our discussion last year, we talked about recovery efforts. We may need $5 million, we may need $6 million, $7 million, $8 million to be able to start recovery and not waiting on funds to come from an outside entity. For example, waiting on FEMA. So your fund balance from your general fund side is typically what our resiliency fund is. So just be aware that in those situations, when we want to come back, we're going to come back to that point. The contingency on our funds is so small that we're not allocating funds for that. We're only allocating contingency funds to cover something that would be smaller in terms of an operational issue. We would come back to here, as you've said before, Mayor, this is where we would come, is to the fund balance, and that's why you protect a healthy fund balance.
Because in 2018, we spent over $6 million up front for debris removal, which, we got reimbursed from FEMA, but it took quite some time to get that reimbursement. Is that not correct, Ron, if I remember?
I think we still have some stuff open in there, but it's not as significant.
So you see, that stuff don't come back to you as easy. And you don't get the service unless you got the cash too, do you? That's what happened there. And the expense is going to be greater 7 years, 8 years later on.
Mayor, and some of those FEMA funds, that goes back to Dr. Washington's point earlier, the federal level is looking at the FEMA funds, that if you've not spent those funds, those are some of those clawback funds. And so for us, we have to wrap those projects up. When you're looking at Hurricane Helene, they have to engage in using those funds now and have a plan that they're going to draw down whatever those funds are. Because I tell you right now, I believe that's a top level discussion point at the federal level is, FEMA from one discussion is untouchable. On the other side, it's, well, if they're not going to use it, we need to bring it back in for the next catastrophic event. So for us, we need to close out, because when it happens the next time, we need to be ready to say, we've finished all these activities and we're drawing down, and we're doing a good job on it. But we just finished with that section just for resiliency so that everyone listening knows that's how we operate. That's why there's $27 million that's sitting unrestricted as of the last audit on the general fund side. It's not because we have a plethora of dollars. I mean, if you do the math, that's representing roughly 48% of general fund expenditures right there, maybe 46. But when you take out $6 to $8 million for what we need to hold for that, and you keep us a reserve, those numbers are right in line for where we need to be to operate our fund. Mayor, that's the last of those highlighted points that we've talked about throughout the year. Your next pages are going to go into the actual budget summaries. This is where, when you look at those pages, if you find any items, please call, text, or email. We'll get the response and we'll send that out to council. And then we'll also start with that at the next workshop so that we can hit those items that council has brought out to you. What I would tell you for this budget, this is a standardized budget compared to last year and the year before. You don't have any extreme projects that are presented to council for funding, but what you do have is you have the concept of we are coming up on a reval year, and I want us to think about that as you're moving forward. And then the second part is when we move forward with our 400-acre project, That's a pretty big ticket item. And so as you're looking at the FY26 budget, we have to be ready to know that at the end of this calendar year, we're going to be asking you to look at those finalized engineer and design plans and then to allocate funds to go into contract for first part of 26. So you'll have to allocate there, and those numbers are across the board. Right now, theoretically, you've got 10 million earmarked. It could be 39 million, it could be 64 million. Who knows what the number is? We'll only know once we start getting bids in. So I say this is a standardized budget that doesn't have a lot of anomalies in it. It does have the prep that a big project is on the horizon and it's going to be presented to you very soon. So I just to say, read through the budget message, those items, check through the itemized pages, look at the fee schedule in the back, and then the draft CIP. Any questions you have, just start sending those so that we can start dialogue for the next workshop. I'd like to have those items so that we can present, knock those out, and then general questions you would present during the workshop, we'll answer those on demand. Any questions on the format?
Solid.
That's all we have on that one, Mayor. I do have a couple of One City moments I'd like to draw attention to, Mayor. The first one we have up, we did have our Harmony celebration. So these are the awards that the Jacksonville Youth Council awards each year for area youth-led projects. So this was their event. You can see Mr. Staley there, and then you can see Terrell in the background politicking, making things happen. So we're very excited to have this event over at the public safety facility. Right here, you have White Oak High School. They're receiving $450 for their beekeeping program, and then the other recipient goes to Northside High School for their student-to-student program that welcomes new military students to the area. This is a big part of who we are, both of these programs. It's great to see the high schools come out with programs and then to be awarded through the Harmony Awards for their efforts and to keep their programs alive. Very great job to keep the Youth Council active in our community. Good job to Pamela Trafton and the team for making it happen. A couple years ago, Tracy brought this to us and said, we want to bring back the Harmony program. It has value. It gives value to the teen council, and then it has an impact in the community, and it's easily supported through through funding, and it's very exciting to have this program back again and to have the ceremony where we can bring them into the community. So great job there. We also had Neighborhood Improvement Services held their spring refresh. It's not really refreshing for the people that are doing the work, but it is for the people that they're serving. It's awesome to know that community members stepped up to be active and to do projects within the community for people that may not be able to get out there and do the work at their property. Let's get back to that. Let's go back to Debbie Jefferson, because that second screen was a little much. We haven't edited the pictures here.
No, but that other picture is very rare, right?
It is rare.
That's rare.
It's like finding something, like a true gem here.
It took me about a week and a half to recover from carrying that rake.
And I heard that he didn't use the rake, he only carried it around the whole time.
I kept looking at it, I kept trying to pull the string, and it never did start.
It's got a kickstart.
Yeah, it never did start.
But he still did more than I did, because I wasn't out there, and this guy was here. We had the Youth Council was there. You saw pictures of the Youth Council here. We had the Georgetown Preservation Society, the Horizon Realty, and New Beginnings Christian Center. This was on March 29th, and it was in the Georgetown neighborhood. But as you can see, raking the yards, trimming hedges, picking up trash, mowing lawns. They did just about anything and everything. Look at this. One guy's carrying a rake, and this guy's riding a fake lawnmower.
And he had a good time doing it.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I think Pamela Trafton has on a Duke hat as well. Some people do anything to kiss up these days, but
She was sad then.
What a great group. You remember from the last pictures, you saw a lot of the people come through. LaShawn here again, making things happen and being out in the community. This goes back to the same as getting the youth council involved on funding programs, but then getting them active in the neighborhood. You know, we all received an email from a young man saying he wanted to be active, wanted to do something. Here you go. We got some projects. You want to be active? Go join these guys. Yeah, this is a great group of people.
And we have had a lot of assistance from New Beginnings, the youth from there. Heard they didn't have a lot of choices, but we had a lot of support from them. But they really showed up and showed up, as they say. And thanks, actually, Terrell was out there.
Terrell was there, but there's no picture showing it.
Actually, you caught my bad side in the picture with him. That was me, if you'll go back.
Hang on.
One more. Right there.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
So that's me too then, Mayor.
You got my backside.
You can't tell, but that's me there working with Terrell. I'm in the bag. I know. Some people, you can't tell. You got to pose better for the pictures.
Look, Tracy, come on.
Tracy submitted the pictures. And so, man, the last item I have for you is Scouting America gave a Citizen of the Year award. And this year they gave it to what you may know him as Colonel John Kopka, United States Marine Corps retired. What an excellent opportunity for them. I was told that Kopka was a scout back in the day, and now he's still a scout, a very active community member, an excellent advocate for all things United States Marine Corps, United States, Jacksonville, football team, AKA the get back coach, because he does yell ridiculously at people for crossing the little line. But what a great opportunity. Utilized Sturgeon City and was able to recognize Kopka for all of his years of service here in the community. What a great opportunity for our scout program to recognize.
He's very, very active.
Yeah.
He's always been very active in the community. I don't know if anybody's been to any Jacksonville high school football games, but you'll see him on the sidelines many times helping out with the coaching and all. So.
Man, I say about County Commissioner Royce Bennett, he finds a way to show up everywhere. So here you go. He showed up here for Kopka. And so no matter what, Royce is going to be there to support us. So.
That's when he was added to the fabric of the community.
That's from 2018. So we do have the Fabric of Community Awards coming up and the Light Keepers Awards ceremony, and that will be held April 24th. That's all I have, Mayor.
All right, with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Stand.
All opposed?
Aye.